Okay.
Okay, so the first question is, why is geography so important in school?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think I want to start by saying that geography, if it's not taught very well, or it's not high quality, it is not so important in school. I think it's important to make the point that the geography has to be high quality and it has to be well taught for it to be important at school. There are plenty of people, it seems to me, have a negative experience of geography at school, and I would suggest that often that is because it hasn't been taught very well. Something has been missing in the teaching. So why is geography so important in school? Well, I think in the end it's to do with what I would now call capabilities. Capabilities with the meaning attached to it from the project Geocapabilities. And I guess people can find out about that project. But in shorthand, I think what I'm talking about when I think about people's capabilities is their capacity to think independently, which is tough sometimes, but I think it's important in all societies that people are able to think for themselves, and I think geography makes a contribution to that by teaching young people how to think geographically. What do I mean by that? I mean by keeping things whole. The special thing about geography is that it encourages people to think deeply about the world. It is the world subject, with physical and human characteristics all in play with each other. And unlike many sciences, which also aim to make sense of the world, geography keeps things together. It tries to keep things whole. It tries to keep things connected. And if we want to think about sustainability and the future of ourselves in the planet, coping with some of the colossal challenges that face us, climate change is the big one, but there are others, such as plastic pollution and so on and so forth, then we need to think of how societies work and how societies relate to the environments and make the environments around them. In short, we live in an epoch which more and more people are beginning to refer to as the Anthropocene, the period of the Earth's history where physical systems are being impacted by human behaviours. And this is a profound moment in human history. And geography has a lot to offer in helping young people understand that and think about it independently. That's why geography is important.
Okay, now we are going to the second question, which you can take a look first. So the second question is, can you identify the most important or influential piece of research or idea or concept or approach like that in geography education during your career?
I will try, and it's a hard question.
Yeah,
my career has been quite long. I think my career began 45 years ago when I decided to become a teacher. So 45 years is a long time. But having thought about this question, I think the one idea that I would single out, it is a geographical idea, but it does not come from a person who is usually described as a geographer. But some time ago, I think in the 1980s, perhaps a little earlier, Edward Said wrote a book called Orientalism, and I think that has been a very, very important idea in the way I have thought about my subject, geography. I think Orientalism has been an idea that has been influential in many, many fields. But for me, to put it simply, it enables me to, or it enabled me to see that geography has to be multi-perspectival. Orientalism opened the door to the idea that to make sense of the world you have to rely on multiple stories, because we have multiple interpretations and experiences of the world. I think Edward Said's main role was to suggest that the dominance of Western science has meant that the gaze on the world and the gaze on the people of the world tends to be through a Western lens. It tends to be unidirectional. And the book alerted me to the dangers of that. And so I'm very keen that my subject does retain an attachment to the idea that it is who is studying whom that is very important to address. Who is looking at who is telling the story. Very, very important. So that's my big idea, but there have been many.
Yeah, of course. Let me check if the view is okay. Yeah, it's good. Now we're moving to the third question, which is we need you to list top 3 influential people in the field of educational studies who have an impact on your work.
Yeah. I think first in my list of 3 would be Rex Walford, who was my PGC tutor in 1973 to 74 at Cambridge University. So he trained me to be a teacher, and he was an inspirational man. He died in tragic circumstances 10 years ago now. He drowned in the River Thames in a boating accident. But his influence on my career has been constant ever since I first met him. What has his influence been? I think in so many ways, but I think the one thing that Rex was always adamant about is that you have to excite people. If you want them to learn, you have to motivate them and excite them and surprise them. And he did that with us in spades, and I just hope that I manage to do that sometimes with the children I taught and the students I've encountered along the way. So he'd been on my number 1. Number 2, I think I'm going to try and keep this as close to geography as possible. I think number 2 would be Norman Graves. Norman Graves was the professor of geography education here, the first professor of geography education here, and he was on the panel of people who appointed me when I came here as a teacher trainer. So I knew of his work before I ever first met him, and I think what Norman did in the 1970s was to bring into this country, into the world of geography education into this country, the idea of curriculum change, curriculum planning, curriculum development. and his ideas were influential beyond geography, I think, in that regard. But certainly he has been inspirational to me in terms of my attachment to this idea. Curriculum to me is one of the very few ideas in educational studies that come from educational studies. It is an educational idea, and it's so important, and I thank Norman for that. Have I got time for my third?
Yeah, of course.
My third inspirational or impactful or influential people, I think, would be later in my career, and I would probably choose to mention Michael Young, who I've worked with quite closely over the last, say, 10 years. I've known Michael Young for longer than that, but it was after his 2008 book, Bringing Knowledge Back In, and we shared a stage at a conference for head teachers in 2010. We realised that we had a lot to talk about because we were both interested in knowledge, and I find Michael's idea of powerful knowledge, which comes, you know, from the sociology of Bernstein, who was here, and Michael was one of Bernstein's students, has been really, really important to me. For reasons that I tried to explain very briefly at this conference where we're at the moment, yesterday. And it comes from this idea from Jerome Bruner, who's the American educationist, who in his wonderful book, The Process of Education, said that you can teach anything in an intellectually honest way to anyone at any time. That is a really, really inspirational idea. And it is that ambition that has led me to powerful knowledge, because powerful knowledge encourages us to think hard about what is worthwhile and significant in geography to teach. So those are my three.
Yeah, done.
Have I gone on
In
too long?
sequence.